So aliens are amongst us, and they have been for a long time. So alien plants or alien species at all are the species which are here in the place where we are, but not by themselves, but they were brought by humans. But none of them are invasive. For example, the non-native or alien species is the horse chestnut tree or beech tree. It was brought by people, but it doesn't bother us too much, and nature is quite okay with them. But some of them can be invasive, and this means that these are the plants which have a negative impact on the economy, wildlife, or habitats. And there are plenty of them around, and I will focus today on two of them, because I have very short time, on Japanese knotweed and giant hogweed, which probably most of you at least heard about them. They get some publicity. So, but maybe let's start. How did they get here at all? So usually it's just people who brought them here, and some of them, like in case of animals, they were just released. But in case of plants, they usually escaped from gardens. And Japanese knotweed or rhododendron are the examples of such plants. They were brought mostly by Victorians to their ornamental gardens. And because the climate here in Ireland is very mild, they were more than happy to be here, and they spread more rapidly here than they would in their own homelands. So we are afraid of them because they outcompete native species, which means that they can feed better or faster, they can grow faster than our native species, and this way they can stop our species to grow or just to live. They can also, in case of animals, alien species, they can just prey on our native species, or they can change the nature and environment so far that our native species cannot survive anymore. Also, they can introduce parasites and pathogens which our native species are not used to, and that's why they can suffer because of that. So Japanese knotweed is a very common plant now. It was, these are the other names of Japanese knotweed, other scientific names. It was brought from Japan, as the name suggests, in the 19th century, because it spreads so nicely and so quick and it covers everything. So it was, the Victorians were delighted by this plant, but it escaped from the gardens and became a nuisance. So they die back for the winter. Only the rhizomes in the ground stay alive. And in the spring we can see nice shoots, which look like asparagus shoots. And they're fleshy and red tinged. When they mature, they have these bamboo-like canes, also reddish. And they're empty inside. The leaves have flattened base and pointed tip, and they grow in this zigzag pattern on a stem. Flowers appear in August and they stay until October. So right now they're still visible on the plants, if you have some around you. They're small and white. And this plant, Japanese knotweed, is dioecious, I'm very bad at pronunciation of this word, which means that there are male and female plants, like for example with holly bush. And we seem to have only female plants here in Ireland, in Europe generally. So as long as anybody brings a male plant from Japan, they only spread by rhizomes, they don't set seed. By saying that, they do set seed sometimes, but they are just not fertile because they need a male plant. In the autumn they turn reddish, and in the winter the overground parts of the plant die back, and we can see exposed ground everywhere. So during the growing season, since spring until autumn, it's all covered by this plant, by Japanese knotweed, and literally nothing grows underneath because it blocks the light totally. And then in the winter time, when they die back, especially if they grow along the roots of water roots, they expose the ground, and this way the soil is very prone to erosion. So this is one of such banks. It's a long railway, and in the winter it's all exposed. So during the winter rains, the soil can just be lost. So the rhizomes are generally underground stems. So they spread up to 7 meters from the parent plant. So even when we see growth of the Japanese knotweed, we have to be aware that 7 meters in diameter around the plant, the rhizomes are there and they can sprout from there. So it's not enough that we remove just the plant. And they can go up to 3 meters in depth, so quite deep as well. Well, the rhizomes are very important because this is the part of the plant which is more vigorous to grow and to spread. And they're not very, they're very similar to any other rhizomes which we can, or roots which we can find in the soil. And that's why when we move the soil, we can accidentally spread the Japanese knotweed. And that's what usually happens. And we can see sometimes a pile of freshly brought soil on the field or on somebody's backyard, and you can see in the spring sprouting new Japanese knotweed plants. So somebody got a nice surprise and have some trouble. This is the crown. This part is where part of the rhizome where the stems grow from, and this is a very viable part as well. And even very tiny section of rhizome, like the fingernail size, it's enough for the plant to survive and to spread further. So sometimes it's virtually impossible to find it in the soil. So the things that are important, they don't pose any harm to people, but they destroy buildings. They can grow through tarmac, through concrete. They can grow through the buildings itself. So they're amazing plants. In their natural habitat in Japan, they will grow in a very harsh environment. They will grow even through hot ashes from volcanoes. And it's very little chance for them to survive there. That's why they have to be so invasive there. But that works very well in Japan, but here in Ireland, it's a great nuisance. It's again another picture. So that's why it's a problem, because very often, even if somebody fights with Japanese knotweed, the neighbor doesn't do anything about it. So even though we can fight on this side, it will come back. So, and as I said before, the other thing is that they stop other plants to grow. So the important thing to remember right now, it is illegal to dump Japanese knotweed waste or just to spread the Japanese knotweed anywhere. To cause Japanese knotweed to grow. And if we want to move soil that contains Japanese knotweed, even in small quantities, you need to have a license from National Parks and Wildlife Service. Well, also, if we cut the plants, we shouldn't compost it, because they can still grow back sometimes, even from the stems, if they have right conditions. So basically, if you want to finish off Japanese knotweed someplace, we have to have a very good management plan, and we have to fight with them for at least 5-7 years. So it usually involves spraying with Roundup, and also very careful digging out. But spraying seems to be the cheapest way of it, but spraying for several years. And the other way is to eat them, because the young shoots in the spring, they're edible. They're similar a little bit to rhubarb, a little bit to asparagus. I saw also and ideas to make Japanese knotweed relish for your sandwiches. So there are some ideas, so we should go out every spring and collect them and try to do our best. Well, there are some ideas to do some biological control, which means that we could bring some animals or maybe parasites which would feed on invasive plants, for example, on Japanese knotweed, and to stop them in spreading. But this is also very dangerous because we don't know what these animals would do if they got to our environment. So I'm personally against that. So another plant which I want to talk about is the giant hogweed. It's very, very similar to our hogweed. It looks the same. It's just giant. So our hogweed is harmless. It's very common along hedgerows, and it doesn't cause any harm to us. It has also quite large flower heads. You can see that compared to the hand, but it's much smaller. It grows only to maybe 150 centimeters, which is around here tall. But the giant hogweed, again, was brought in the 19th century by Victorians. And in the place where they come from, in the Caucasus region, again, it's very cold. The winters are cold, and they need to have produced thousands or millions of seeds to survive. But the weather here is much nicer, so that's why most of the seed just survive and sprout in the spring, and that's why it became invasive. This is one of the pictures comparing to the people. This is just a boy, so let's say that the adult person would be a little bit taller, like this. So they can grow up to 5 meters in height. They are biennial or perennial herbaceous plants, which means that they can live either 2 years or a few years longer, but they die back for the winter. The stem is kind of reddish, and it has these hairs everywhere. This is the dried one. It's very similar to our native hogweed. Leaves are huge, up to 1.5 meters in width. So this big when fully grown. Oh, not this way. Sorry. And they grow in rosettes. Now, the flowers are very big, and in the first years of, especially in the first year of giant hogweed growth, the flowers may not appear at all. So the only thing which we can see is the leaves. And they spread by seeds only. They can produce thousands of seeds, and they are very, very viable. But the thing which bothers us is the phototoxic sap they produce. So on the stem's edges and undersides of the leaves bear small hairs containing this phototoxic sap, which means that it is toxic, but only when it's exposed to sun. So if we touch the giant hogweed or break it, or even a very hot day, the sap can get to the air, and we walk by the giant hogweed, and the sap gets on our skin. Nothing really happens until the sun gets on your skin as well. Then the toxin in the sap becomes active, and it causes painful blistering and severe skin irritation, and it can take up to 48 hours to appear after exposure. So in the beginning, we don't even think that it's because of the giant hogweed, because we can forget that we walked by this. And it can even come back for years all the time. So it's not nice at all. So always if we walk along the giant hogweed, there has to be protective clothing. But if anything happens and any sap gets to our skin, we have to cover it so the sun cannot get there, and then go to the doctor. Now I will show a few pictures of the of the blister, so if somebody doesn't want to see it, just close your eyes. So this is the and this is a child, in hands on a child, and it is very painful. And the animals are not safe. This dog just sniffed the giant hogweed, and that's what happened to his nozzle. So you can open your eyes. So the negative impacts are obviously because it's harmful to humans, but also, again, it grows it covers huge areas sometimes, and it excludes native species, like the Japanese knotweed, because they can't grow underneath, because the giant hogweed grows very fast. And, oh, I have to finish, sorry, I'm too slow. And they die back for the winter, which means that the soil is exposed again, and it is prone to erosion. So this is the kind of clothing people have to work with. And again, it's usually spraying, which we have to do. But the most important thing with any invasive species is just not to let to establish itself in the area. Just we have to start to react as soon as possible. And just like coming back to Japanese knotweed, I just have to remind that if we don't know, that's very important. If we're not sure what to do, it's better to do nothing. Mm-hmm. So because if the plants are left alone, if they're not being cut, like we can see sometimes that they are being cut along the roads a few times a year, they don't grow so fast, and they just stay contained to one place. But when we start to cut them and dig them out, we can do much more harm than just leaving them alone. So it's better sometimes to leave them alone. But with the giant hogweed, it's better to react react fast. So I just didn't want to talk about it, just remind that there are two other terrible plants which I hate, it's rhododendron and cherry laurel, which especially on the peat soils, they can be very invasive, and it's very hard to get rid of them. And also Himalayan balsam, which covers vast areas of the riverbanks especially. So if we spot them, we can always find any advice on the very good website, Invasive Species Ireland. Also, we can report the sighting at the biodiversityireland.ie. And basically, that's it for today. I'm a little bit late, sorry for that. It was long. Thank you.